Hi, second graders. So we're going to be all doing the same reading for the next couple of weeks because it's a longer unit that I need to teach to everyone. So this is just going to be a unit that we all are going to do together. We're going to read two different stories and we're going to do some activities that go with them. And the title of this series that we're going to be working on is Fables. Sometimes you've heard them called folk tales. We had one group already that worked on some folk tales, but now we're all going to concentrate on what a fable is and some of the different parts of a fable. So let's backtrack and go over this. I've got some slides to show you. So we have fables. And I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of them, but now we're really going to get into some of the details of a fable. Fables are stories that teach a lesson or moral, and they have animals that act and talk like humans. So what is a moral? I know a lot of us already may know what that means, but maybe you don't know the word moral. So it's a lesson. It's supposed to teach us a lesson about something. So that's what fables are. They have a setting, and we're familiar with this from the other books that we've read throughout the year. A setting is basically when, meaning the time, and where, or the place, that a story takes place. We often have a fool in the story. Now you might recognize the character that's on this page. That's Little Red Riding Hood. She was kind of foolish, a little naive. She believed that grandmother was still in her home. So we have this person that gets tricked, a character in the story that a trickster tries to outsmart. And they usually do this by being unkind. Well, who is the trickster? Obviously, in Little Red Riding Hood, it was the wolf. And this is a character in the story who tries to outsmart the other characters. So when we get into reading our stories about fables, I want you to keep your eye out for the one that's being fooled and the trickster. Often in our fables, we have a conflict. And what is a conflict? Well, that's something that goes wrong in the story because there's either a disagreement or some kind of struggle, but we always have a resolution. A resolution means how the problem is solved. And of course, as I said, we have a moral. A moral is the lesson that they learn. So it's a lesson about life that teaches a fable. Okay, the moral can usually be found at the end of the story. All right, so what do we find in a fable? Okay, we have animals that act like people. We have a moral. We usually have a hero, and we have a villain. We have a character that has a weakness. There's not very many characters. Usually in a fable, you're only going to find 2 or 3 characters, and usually the setting takes place outside. Usually. Okay? Now, today we're going to concentrate on a story that you may be familiar with, but I want you to concentrate on those different elements, the different parts of the fable that we were talking about. The setting, the characters, the trickster, the fool, what the conflict is, and how it gets solved. And then finally, let's look for the moral, the lesson that the fable is trying to teach. Okay, I'm going to read. You can look at the pictures and read along with me. The Tortoise and the Hare. One day a hare was walking in the forest when he saw a tortoise. The hare was the fastest animal in the forest. The tortoise was the slowest animal in the forest. The hare called out to the tortoise, "Hurry up! You are so slow. Can't you walk faster? Can't you run?" The tortoise felt angry and said, the hare, "Why don't we have a race? Maybe I can win." The hare laughed and laughed. "Sure, I will win," the hare said. They agreed to start next to a big tree and finish at the river. Then they called their friends to watch. The hare stood beside the tortoise, and the race began. The hare ran quickly, and in a few minutes the hare was out of sight. The hare said to himself, "The tortoise is so very far behind. I can practically see the finish line. I have time for a nap." Soon the hare was fast asleep under a tree next to the path. The tortoise walked straightly on and on. He didn't stop. Soon he passed the sleeping hare. The hare slept for an hour. When he finally woke up, he looked at the finish line. He could not believe his eyes. The tortoise was almost there. The hare ran as fast as he could, but it was too late. The tortoise crossed the finish line and won the competition. The hare was furious. The tortoise looked back at the hare and smiled. Then he said, "Slow and steady wins the race." Okay, second grade. So let's kind of dissect our fable a little bit. So, what did you learn the setting of the story was? When and where did the story take place? Well, it took place in the forest, right? By a big tree and a river. Who was the fool in our story? Who was the one that was trying to be tricked, right? The trickster and the fool. Well, the fool was the tortoise. He was trying to be, the hare was trying to outsmart him. So the trickster was definitely the hare, the rabbit, because he thought he was so smart. And what was the conflict? Well, what went wrong? Well, the hare thought he could outsmart the tortoise by running much faster. But of course, we know he got a little overly confident, and he ended up losing because he was too overly confident. He thought he could win no matter what he did. But we learned that the moral, or the lesson, which you've heard Mrs. Bennett say over and over and over again in class, slow and steady wins the race. We say this I say this all the time in class. Just because you're the first one done doesn't necessarily mean you've taken your time and done a really good job. Sometimes slowly working at something and being very careful is the way to come out on top, is the way to win your race, right? So the moral of this story was the tortoise, kept going at the race. He didn't stop. He persistent, right? That's a word we know from our positivity project. So being persistent, don't give up, keep going. All right. So for tomorrow, we're going to have an activity, and I'm going to show you that activity now.